Welcome everybody to the second session of the day, SQL Server Configuration with dbatools and dbachecks with Tracy, is it Boggiano or Boggiano?
Boggiano.
Boggiano, sorry about that.
It's
And
okay.
Tracy is a data platform MVP. Congratulations, Tracy, was last year. And it was a Passion 2020 award winner, which is super cool. She's a senior DBA for DocuSign, and she's worked with SQL Server since 6.5. She speaks at many user groups, SQL Saturdays, virtual groups, many, including past Summit. She's co-leader of the Triangle SQL Server user group in Raleigh. She's tinkered with databases since middle school just to keep her card collection organized. So she's been working with databases for a long time. Her passion outside of SQL Server is volunteering by advocating for abused and neglected foster children in court with the North Carolina Guardian Ad Litem program. And this is her favorite and most important job, her purpose in life, right? And she's been a guardian is it Ad Litem?
Yes.
Okay, for 18 plus years and advocated for over 50 children. As someone who's experienced mental health issues, she has for the past 2 years started being a mental health advocate by being part of the PAIMI protective bubble of individuals with mental illnesses adversary advisory council with the DRN. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Tracy. If anyone has questions, be sure to put them in the Q&A and we will get those to Tracy. Will answer questions periodically throughout the session. So take it away, Tracy.
All right. Well, thank you for doing my very long bio. We're here to do SQL Server Configuration with dbatools and dbachecks because I think those are very cool community projects that can help you with your SQL servers and making sure the configuration on them is very consistent throughout your whole environment. We already talked a lot about me, so there's a whole bunch of icons on here. And like I said, my most favorite and important job is up in the top right-hand corner as the North Carolina Guardian Ad Litem advocate. It's my volunteer job, and the DBA job just really pays the bills so that I can advocate for kids in court. I just spent all of yesterday in court for a case, which was fun. I took my last PTO day I have for a while. So things turned out great. That is super fantastic on that end. One other thing I did want to mention on this slide is just the speakingmentors.com website, so that I know the WIC group does mentoring of speakers coming up that want to speak, but Speaking Mentors also has a list of mentors that you can just pick from and contact directly as far as getting mentoring and speaking. So if you're interested in becoming a speaker, you can check out that website, and there's a bunch of profiles of different people across the globe that would be willing to help you get started in speaking. So beyond that, the best way to contact me, because Boggiano is hard to spell for most people and let alone pronounce, so I would just go to databasesuperhero.com and all my contact information is available there, and you can directly email me and everything. So my Twitter DMs are open once you make it to Twitter and can spell my name, but again, the link to Twitter is on my website. So we'll move on to the presentation now because she did a really good job on my bio. We'll start off with how to install everything, because that's, can't use it unless you install it. So the first thing to note is that the newest Pester 5 breaks things in dbachecks, and it is a key component to dbachecks. So you can't just install the module for dbachecks and then be off and running like you used to be able to, because otherwise it would install the newest version of Pester with it. So the first thing you would need to do is install the old version of Pester first, so that it doesn't install Pester 5. So here's the command for this, and I do have all these in scripts that are available for download off my website, so don't worry about print screen anything like that. So this is the command to download the newest or the newest version of Pester 4. Then you would just install the module for dbachecks, and that will actually install dbatools and anything else you need to go with it. and you're ready to be up and running with dbachecks from there. So pretty simple as far as installing the PowerShell commands, PowerShell modules to get going with this. So we're going to talk about just a tiny bit about what dbatools is, just in case no one's heard of it. It's an open source PowerShell module that was developed by a lot of people in the SQL community contributing to it. I think there's probably 100 contributors, and we have over 500 commands at this point that can help you manage your SQL Server. There's even one command that can take and migrate all your databases from one server to another server and take care of, copying all your logins, your jobs, and everything for you. There's lots of blogs out there about how to do different things within dbatools. So if you haven't heard of it, it's got a lot of power for automating doing things that you should check out. And it's basically being built to do anything and everything that you can do via the script or via SSMS in PowerShell. So it's definitely worth an investment in time. There is a dbatools book that's being written in Manning. It's available via a MEEP right now, so you can get the chapters as they come out. I think they're close to getting finished with it. Not sure the finish date, but there's also, if you look on their website, there's a 50% discount code to get it that's on there forever and ever. So a little tip there to get that. So dbatools by default, because it has so many commands, the best way to look at it, besides looking at their website with dbatools.io.commands, is you can run a command to look at any modules commands that are in there by doing git command module and the name of the module, which is dbatools. And I did a format wide by name. That way that'd be the only thing I could see. And by doing that, I got back this little bit that I could print screen, because it shows so much. But as you can see, there's a lot of commands that you can add. There's a lot of AG commands here, things for doing database mirror monitoring, things for clearing out your latch wait stats, your wait stats, your latch stats, things for copying over particular objects like agent jobs, agent operators. Most of the copy commands do have things to actually create those objects as well as remove them. Some of them don't, some of them do. You even got commands in here for backing them up. This is just a very small subset of what is actually available in dbatools. And the best way to explore this is to, kind of just dive in there. As far as dbachecks it's basically the same thing. It was developed by it's open source module developed by the SQL community contributing to it. It doesn't have as many contributors, but it's there. And basically what it does is just checks your SQL Server's default configuration or your customized configuration, because you're able to set properties so it can match what you want it to be. For example, we're going to be setting up database mail, and you may want your database mail operator to be for DBAs to be named DBA or some other like DBA ops or something like that. And you'd be able to customize that name by setting a value in there. And then it would compare against that and make sure that that value is what it's set to. And we're actually going to use dbatools to set all that up and then compare and make sure things are set up correctly. And all these particular values are set. So we'll understand more what that means once we look at our Power BI report of things that it's flagging that need to be set up. But it provides output to Power BI or to a table or to a JSON file. By default, it's going out to a JSON file, and then we're reading it into Power BI so that we can visualize it and see it, because, management likes, pretty charts. So if you can show them, hey, 50 servers, this is what was happening, and all these servers didn't have the right configuration values that they should have, and now I reran it and it has this much stuff that's better. You can show them that you've made progress. Personally, that's my favorite way to do things, is via charts, because it impresses management. Behind the scenes, it uses as much as it can dbatools functions to retrieve the values to test to make sure that they're set accurately. If there isn't a dbatools function for it, because there are some things that it tests that are against the computer itself. Like if it's part of a domain, that's not a dbatools function. It will use, actual different PowerShell than that. But that's why dbatools is considered a component that it downloads with dbachecks. And then we mentioned Pester before. Now, Pester is actually the framework it uses for testing, and Pester is just made for testing. It's a PowerShell module that is created for testing things, and it has a certain format where you put things in a certain order, and it set up the PowerShell, and it will go through and test things and run things in order and return values and tell you whether it failed or passed and things like that. So that's why that module is considered, you have to have the right version, because I don't know exactly what they changed in 5 that broke it, but it's not compatible with 4 at all. So it takes quite a bit of effort to upgrade that. So you do have the ability also, if you wanted to write your own test. We will not be covering that in this session just due to the amount of time in the session, and maybe one day I will do a more advanced session that covers a few extra things, but this is just a basic session. dbachecks itself has very few commands. This literally is all the commands it has that you can see on the screen. The ones that we use the most are the invoke dbcheck, which will actually check all the checks. We'll use the set dbconfig, so we can set, hey, the db operator should be equal to dba. Our trace flags that we want enabled on the system should be this, and things like that. We can use the get dbconfig to actually see them. And there's a lot of things that you can do in between all of these things to use the other commands to do other things. But again, we're keeping this presentation pretty basic due to the amount of time we have. So the get dbcheck, as I mentioned, we could use that to see what different values we can actually set and what checks it actually has. So this is a list of checks it does actually run. So as you can see, there are 10 plus things that it runs against the SQL agent itself, like checking to make sure the database mail is actually disabled because it's considered a security risk by CIS. I wrote all the CIS checks into this project so that we could use it at work. And we're actually looking at writing it for STIG for the DIS compliance stuff, for the Fed security stuff, but we're actually leaving our database mail enabled, even though it's CIS, blah, 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 security, blah, 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 security people. Sometimes they don't like things. They don't like DAC to be enabled either. So, hey, I need DAC, But at any rate, you can also tell it what you want your fail-safe operator to be, what you want your regular operator to be, what service agent account things should be running under. So if you run the same agent account across all your servers, you can set that. And there's ways to go about setting a lot of things. You can set whether you want to check for suspect pages or not, what database correlation things should have, because most of the time your database correlation is the same across your org. So, but there's a list of probably at least 200 of these things that it checks. So to actually run a check, you actually just do an invoke dbcheck, give it the instance name, the computer name. You can put all checks in there and just, see what all it gives you. There is an exclude that I do to exclude a few that don't apply to us, just so the checks run a little bit faster. And then just do show summary, pass through to the PowerBI data source so that it will stick it in the JSON file location so that the PowerBI report can run it. If you have PowerBI installed on your system, you can run the start PowerBI and it'll automatically bring up your PowerBI local instance and show you the report. Then you actually have to hit refresh in order for it to actually retrieve the values from your actual data source. So this is what it looked like when I first started giving this presentation. We always had 126 failures. So what I do for this presentation is I try to go through and get that down to as little failures as possible. And I think I got it down to 12 now, if I remember correctly from doing this last week. Might be somewhere around in there. So we will actually start doing demos now, and I will check for questions at this point as well, just in case there are any before I start diving into code.
Here is one question. It seems, and this was early on in the presentation, it seems you need sysadmin rights on at least the database server to use this. And I assume that means, I don't know if they meant dbachecks, I guess, or puster. I'm not sure which one.
Yes, because a lot of things you'll be checking are like SP configure for like your max stop, your max memory, and those type of commands are usually sysadmin type commands. So that is true. There are certain things that run that do not need that type of level of permissions, but it depends on the check you're running. But if you're going to run the whole suite of checks, you're going to need to be a sysadmin.
That's all for now.
So, like, for example, we're going to be installing all the scripts here. Not the first thing we're going to do, but you wouldn't have to be a sysadmin to do that. But you would have to be able to create agent jobs to do that, and somebody giving you the ability to create agent jobs and all that stuff without being a sysadmin is very unlikely. Or, you know, there's just so much of this stuff is sysadmin related items. So this is by default what we got now on our system. This is a fresh install of SQL Server. We are only going to run it against one server. You can run this against multiple servers at one time. You can name it by environment and get like a prod instance, a test instance, and all that saved in one environment and make this really fancy. I just don't have this set up for that for a simple presentation. So the first thing we're going to look at is getting rid of our biggest category, of course, so that we can knock the numbers down fast, is our SQL agent alerts. And if you click on that, it's basically going to tell you that we don't have any set up and we don't have any, you know, any of them configured. We don't have, you know, anybody being notified if these things happen and things like that. So that'll be the first round of code that we actually run for dbatools to actually set that stuff up. So we'll go over to VS Code. And yes, I did update VS Code on the whim this morning because, you know, nothing ever breaks. But before we do that, like I said, I do have the command in here to update your pester for you so that you don't have to worry about that yourself. I did update my PS framework because I was on an older version of Windows Server. And then you just installed dbachecks. I did go ahead and update my dbachecks and dbatools this morning because I'm brave and not afraid anything's going to break at all. This command right here will actually send all your dbatools commands out to a grid. So if you wanted to search for something, you could find something in here. So if you wanted to search for like availability group, you can narrow down anything that had to do with availability group and try to find the commands that had to do with that. You can also, you know, use the list on their website to find things as well, but it doesn't have the descriptions there. It just has a list of the commands. Or search through GitHub. That's usually how I do it. You can also use it by tag. They use tags inside of their PowerShell help. So you can find anything that has to do with agent by doing a tag. And I didn't do that to a grid, so they have a few things out here. So they got, you know, the copy of the DB agent alert, and the newest one they got, because I wrote it, is new DBA agent operator, because I didn't have that and I needed it for this presentation. So I got a few others to write for this presentation, so it's not using SMO. And again, if we take a look at DBC check, we can see all the different checks that dbachecks will actually run against the system. There's quite a few of them, so you kind of have to know what they are, and it gives you a description of them and tells you what it's testing for and what the config values are for them if you want to set them, and what they use and what type they are. So whether they run against a SQL instance or whether they run against the computer, what their tag is, because you can just run one tag at a time. Like I could run just database mail enabled and test for it. So there is the ability to run things that don't require sysadmin if they're non-sysadmin tasks. But most of these things are for sysadmins anyways, so. And then for those not too familiar with PowerShell, if you ever need help with the command, there is the get help, and you just put the command after it. I'm using the SP configure one just because it's a common one that we use to set config values, like, you know, optimize for ad hoc workloads and max memory and stuff like that. You can use that and get the PowerShell help provided to you on your screen. So it'll give you values. And the good thing with dbatools is they actually take you out to their web page too, so you can see different things as well. And it provides you the syntax of everything and what information it is and what you need to do. And then you do have different parameters for like examples, and if you wanted a detailed explanation or if you wanted to see the full. So, and then it can actually just pull it from online rather than from your local system. So just to give you a little bit of tools to use as you're going through and trying to get comfortable with PowerShell and how to use the commands. These are ways to get some help with them. So now we'll actually try to clean up our agent alerts. So the first thing I'm going to do is just set my instance name to dbatools so I don't have to type dbatools2 everywhere. Then these are the values I'm going to set up for my mail account and profile, my weird email addresses I'm going to use for setting up database mail. Then we're going to set the values that it's actually going to test against to these variables. And then we're going to actually be able to see those. And you can see right here, I've got your at mail, DB mail, and DBA below it. So those are set to what I had asked them to be set to. Then because I do have to use a tad bit of SMO while I'm writing some commands for dbatools to make this 100% dbatools, I'm going to create a connection to the server using a dbatools command so that we can use a little bit of SMO. I'm going to create a server object here because we will need that later. And I'll explain the use of that later as well. So the first thing we're going to need to do is turn database mail on, because by default, when you install SQL Server, it is off. And you can see the dbatools spits out, you know, what it did, and the previous value was off, and now it is on. Then we're going to create a database mail account. And the cool thing about using these scripts is once you have a set of scripts, you can just run these across all your servers the same way. And if you need different parameters, you can just change them at the top. So once you have a set of scripts that you want to use for setting things up, you're pretty much good to go. So now we're going to set up the initial mail profile of the server, but we also need to change the agent mail type on there because it does not do that for you. So that's where I had to set up the server object type and tell it to alter it. That's one reason we have to have that server object. And then we get to use my new command to create an operator. So now we've got a DBA operator. And we're still going to use the server object a little bit here. We're going to go and get the SQL DBA agent, and we're going to use a little bit of SMO to actually make the alert notification turn it on as a fail-safe operator, because that is not in my new thing yet. I need to fix that because I thought I had it working in my dbatools function and did not get it working. So now, so far dbatools does not have the ability to add a new agent alert. It has like a copy one, but not a new one. So I plan on creating these 3 functions for this. So for now, we're going to be using SMO and that server object to create alerts, but we're going to create alerts 16 through 25. And we're also going to create our indication of corruption alerts. And we're just going to name them error alert number, and they're not going to have fancy names or anything that tell us, you know, what they might mean. We're not going to have pretty names. We could work on that at some other time if we wanted to. So I was looping through and creating the 16 through 25 alerts and the 4 severity alerts for the corruption. And I also added this code on the end to tell it to notify the operator as well, because again, it doesn't have the code for that. So it's using SMO for that. So that will be part of the adding an alert also when I write that command for dbatools. So let's let it loop through that, and then we will update our Power BI report to see if we can knock down that number 39 to nothing. Is our goal. Is it done? Yeah, it's actually done. Oops, sorry, I didn't notice it was finished. So run that over here so we can leave VS Code free. Is there any questions about how I went about running this code or anything to do with anything at this point?
There's no questions right now, but we can, if anybody has one, please enter it in the Q&A.
We have a few seconds while this runs because it took about 1.5 minutes last time to run, so I'm going to give it a chance to run so we can actually see the report and prove that I can get it below 129 failed ones. But while we're doing that, we can also take a look and see at some of the stuff that we created in SSMS. So if we go under SQL agent, we can actually see that we have all the alerts that I created. There goes our operator. We go under here, we should see alert system. I did not do that, but I did do this. I'll have to look at that. Fail-safe operator should have been turned on. It normally works. But it's got our database mail profile set up and stuff like that, so we can test it and send mails and things like that. So, but it set up all our things that we wanted it to set up in DBA inside the SQL Server, so we can visually see that it worked. And now the checks are done running, so now we can actually refresh the job and get us down from 124 failed things to something much less. 83. So that accomplished a lot, just setting up database mail and SQL agent alerts. That's a huge accomplishment, because that's, you know, the basis of what we do as a DBA. We need to know what's going on the server, and without agent alerts and database mail, you really don't know what's going on unless you have a different way of getting your notifications. So now on to part 2. All the hologram scripts, because that takes up a lot of stuff on there. Now, if you don't use all the hologram scripts, there is a way to leave this off of the checks. You can exclude them and you don't have to install them, so don't feel like you have to use them, because I know there's many where you may be using the dreaded database maintenance plans. You may have wrote your own solution. You may have a third-party tool, again, dreaded, but again, If you're not using this, that is perfectly fine. You can tell it to skip this check and not be included in there and not worry about it. But considering just what I use, I left it in here. So we're going to clear the host down here, set our variables up. We're going to keep 192 hours worth of backups. This is where we're going to back up things because I didn't want to create a certain backup folder, and set our email operator where we want it to be. So we're going to install the maintenance plan with our variables, telling it where to go. We're going to tell it to include the jobs. We're going to tell it to install everything. And if we happen to have anything already there, we can tell it replace existing. This is kind of important because what you can do, because now it's on GitHub, it gets a lot more updates. So you can actually, after the first time you install this, you can actually remove this install jobs and just do replace existing and get the new code, and then it won't affect your jobs and your job schedules. Because if you do install jobs, you lose your job schedules and it replaces your job schedules. And then you can go about editing your jobs any way you need to after that if you want to add parameters and things that have been added. And if you leave the replacing on there, it will replace the actual stored procedures. But it actually just goes out and downloads it from GitHub for you and installs it into your master database. Now what I've done here is I've taken a number of these jobs and I've split them out to have different schedules based on when I would run it if it was just a generic system that wasn't really big and didn't need a whole lot of attention and stuff. So I just, your mileage is going to vary on what schedule you're going to want. So I've got some, my backups running on Sunday at midnight, diffs running all the other days, logs every 15 minutes, integrity checks running at 2 a.m. on Saturday, optimize running at 10 p.m., and all the little jobs running every night at midnight. So we're going to run that just as one big swoop because it's pretty much doing all the same thing. Then the other thing that it has a complaint about is that the jobs don't have someone that it can email. So we're going to return every job on the system because we don't really have any jobs. We could, except for that one that does a sys purge thing. We need somebody on it too. But if it doesn't have an operator, we're going to set it to our email operator using the set DBA agent job. So that way, if the job fails, we'll get an email about it. I'm going to set my MSDB to have full recovery mode because I like to have backups of when my backups are occurring. That way, if I need to generate scripts for things later, they can happen if it's an emergency. So I like to have backup generated a different way, but this is just for helping out with getting log backups running on the system too. So now another thing it's complaining about that are related to all the scripts is the fact that we don't have any full backups and we haven't ran any integrity checks. And of course we haven't. We just installed SQL Server and we just installed all the scripts. So why would those things be there? So we're going to kick off those jobs as well. And those jobs will take about 10 seconds to run because there's only system databases on here. So now we've done everything we can with all the scripts just that quickly. And literally once you get this set up once, you can literally put in multiple servers and sling it out to 10 servers at once, 20, 50, 100, 1,000. If they're all configured, the same as far as schedules go. So we will go update our Power BI data source real quick. Let it run checks. Any questions as far as how I got all the scripts installed and any questions related to different ways to go about doing it?
Not that specifically, but there is a question.
Okay.
The dashboard that you were using, is that a native tool of dbachecks, or is that something custom designed?
That comes with dbachecks. You just have to download the Power BI desktop. And when you run this command here, you tell it to update the Power BI data source. And then they literally have a command that will start Power BI for you. And then you just hit the refresh command and it will load your data in there. So that's all made from dbachecks. Rob Sewell is actually in charge of this project, and he did all the work on that, or someone might have helped him with it, but that's all built into the project. Was part of what makes it so cool. Okay, and it's done. So now we had 83 failed things. We can get that down quite a bit more. Now we're down to 26. We're doing good. Woohoo. So now that we get down to 26, we're down into the miscellaneous category. Because this is just all the little stuff you can knock off. And I got some things I can show you that are just cool to do that aren't necessarily DBA checks related, but are kind of just neat to do. So one thing is turn on optimize for ad hoc workloads. I think that's been around since 2008, and it's just generally a good idea because it helps keep your memory your procedure cache from being bloated as much. And I have never found a use case for not having it on so far. It likes for your remote admin connections to be turned off. Having your backup compression turned on by default. I've never found a reason not to do that. Save some space wherever you're backing up stuff. Turn off remote access to the server. Those are good things. It likes for SP who is active to be installed. I don't know if anybody's not heard of that by now, but hopefully you have. But that is like a SP who times 100 that can help you troubleshoot stuff. If you go to whoisactive.com, I think it is, it has like a 30-day series on just different ways you can use it to troubleshoot things in your system. But you can actually install it with one line here with the newest version because it's been updated, in October, and now it's in your master database ready for you to run. So this is not inside of dbachecks. Is something that you need is Brent Ozar's first responder kit, but I find it useful to have some of his scripts. I like his SP Blitz index script, for example. And sometimes just having his SP Blitz script for basic things is handy. So you can install that with one line too from GitHub, and then you can always use it to get updates. It does spit out a few warning messages, but those are just because things are installed out of order and they do exist, so don't worry about that. We're going to later run Glenn Allen Berry's diagnostic scripts just because we can. Not that it has anything to do with dbachecks, but it's just kind of cool. You can get like 100 CSV files about your system to troubleshoot it by running one line, instead of the old-fashioned way of running it and copying and pasting. One thing it does have in dbachecks is it checks to make sure that your query store settings are set to the correct settings. And I know Jess wrote a test for that inside of dbachecks and a actual command for it inside of dbatools to test for it. But MSDB by default, you can't turn it on using the GUI, so you have to actually turn it on using the command line anyway. So you might as well just use dbatools to do it because it's this easy to get it set to the right settings. So we'll turn that on, and you have no GUI to ever look at the reports, but you can always look at the DMVs for stuff or the catalog views for stuff. So Last time I tried to rename the SA account, there is a bug, so we will try it and see if it works. But I have a bug filed for this. But this is part of a compliance for security and just for more safety guards, is, you know, having your SA account not be SA, and it did roll it back, so it's still not fixed. Another thing that it has alerts on is the fact that by default, when you install SQL Server, you know, it has your auto growth set to 1 meg and 10% on your logs. So I have this SQL here that looks pretty nasty up at the top that figures out if it's set to that. And then if it is, I select it and get the info to actually run a dynamic SQL to fix it. So, well, if we run that file, it will actually fix all of those and not have it at that awful setting. So, but we actually need a set DBA DB file command in dbachecks, so that'll be something to be worked on later as well. Another thing it looks at for you is trace flags. So if there's a trace flags that you need turned on because your configuration, I know at DocuSign we have some trace flags that we use that are not the typical trace flags. So we can set this up to say, you know, we need trace flag, you know, I think 7425 is one that just happens to be for query store that's now enabled by default in 2019. You can set up all the ones that you want to be enabled, and we'll test to make sure they are enabled. The only one you really need by default, unless you have a out of the wall configuration, is on 2019 anyways, is probably the thing that compresses the backups from being written to your logs. On 2019, you no longer need the temp DB ones, so you would have to set these two, because the way it's written, they are in two different spots for 117 and 118. Maybe we can consolidate those sometime in dbachecks, so they're not set weirdly like this. Now that 2019 has them set by default, but this way we're only worried about 3226 as one of our trace flags. So that'll be the only one that it checks for, and then we've got the command to actually enable it. Then we can set our max stop, which on my system, because I have so few CPUs, it sets it, but the test always still comes back bad for it. So it's only got 2 CPUs, so it sets it to 2, but the test thinks it should be 0. So there's kind of a disconnect there. So, and then we could run the report again at this point, which we will, just because that's going to be the last bit of dbachecks stuff to clean up. And then I'll show you just some other things that you can do with dbatools, just because it's fun, and things that you should just do in general, like setting your power plan to make sure it's at high performance. You know, I'm surprised it's still a thing, but it is. Your cost threshold for parallelism should never be 5 ever again in your whole entire life. That's still from SQL 7 in somebody's workstation in their office back then. So, you know, try out 25 and work your way around from there.
Oh, that's the thing. Oh, everybody, cost threshold for parallelism, right? Nobody knows that was the thing.
Yeah, that needs to be changed so badly. So I bring it up just in case. And then, like I say, you can run Glenal and Berry scripts by default and export them to a path. And it will literally run through all of them and put them in my temp folder right now, which is a nice way to troubleshoot a system. And anything that's blank, and it'll just not output it. It doesn't need it. So there it goes, adding all kinds of stuff. Well, we should sort by the date. So I ran this before, so. And you can, there's different parameters you can set there too, where it can run it against just a particular database or just at the server level and things like that, just the server queries and things like that. So you can troubleshoot exactly what you're trying to troubleshoot. I'm just running the basics. So, but now you got a whole bunch of stuff you can dig through. I used this at a job one time and found a whole bunch of stuff. Another cool thing, I wrote this really extensive process in T-SQL to compress your indexes. If it was over, you could save a certain percentage. I even made it in a Brent Ozar's newsletter with it. And then now it's a one-line command in dbatools. Thank you, Jess, for doing that. But it's a one-line command now. It's much cooler this way. I even put it in my blog to go read this instead. And it'll export what it did into a CVS. So, so if you want to compress your indexes very easily, and you have a window where it can do it, where your system's not too busy, you can have it. If I save 25% space, go out and compress it. Tell me what I did in a temp file, and you'll know what I did. For my last trick, we'll see if this will work this time, because the GDR security update, cumulative update for 2019 has seemed to have messed with my ability to patch a server the last time I did it. But you can actually patch a server, which this does show up in dbachecks as you not being able to, you're not on the latest build, because that's a security thing. Is you can actually just patch a server with one line in here. You can tell it to put it to the temp folder, or you can just tell it to download it directly, and it will actually download it and patch your SQL Server for you. And then it can run from there. And we will let that run. And I will talk about CIS checks after this runs, and we'll take some questions at this point. I think I see some might be mounting up.
Yes. There's a few. Can you run the commands for multiple instances at once?
Yes, you can pass in multiple instances here, just like you can with all dbatools stuff. So
what's the best way to handle database optimizations? Maybe the person asking the question maybe can clarify a little bit.
Yeah, I need a little bit of clarification on that.
Okay, we'll get back to that one. Do you ever put code into a Jupyter notebook for future builds?
I do for future builds. I do know that Rob has built a Jupyter notebook for dbachecks, if that answers your question.
Okay. So I would guess it's definitely possible, whether or not. Okay, so then the only other one, just someone had to drop off early and said, great job. So
Yay.
If the person asking the question about the database optimizations wants to put some clarification, here we go. What's the most efficient approach to database optimizations in general?
In general, not sure that is part of this presentation, so we're doing configurations, but
so that's kind of out of scope for this. She's saying about optimizing indexes, so that's really out of scope for this presentation, I think.
Yeah, because the only thing in dbachecks is it will check for like duplicate indexes and things like that, but it doesn't like go in and looking for missing indexes or tell you how to optimize table designs or anything like that. So
okay. One other,
it doesn't dig into how to design the database or anything.
okay. One other thing, will you have your website shown at the end, so in case they want to download the code?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. Looks like that's it for now.
And she put optimizing indexes based on fragmentation.
Right.
There is actually a blog post I have that I wrote about auto configuring your fill factor based on bad page fragmentation that you can check out on my blog. That based on how much bad fragmentation you get, it will auto adjust your page fill for you so that you don't have to fragment your indexes as often. And I know, I'm trying to think of his name. Mike Bird also has a presentation on that as well that he did for Group by last time around, I think it was, or the time before they did Group by. But I do have a blog post with a lot of code on how to do that, because we took all our indexes and rebuilt them up to 100% and let this algorithm pull them down by 2% at a time, but no lower than 70%. And we saved a lot of space, and we did a lot less defragmenting at the same time.
Looks like it for now.
That may help you with that. Now that I know exactly what the more specific questions. There's a lot to do to optimize a database. So, well, it's installing the update right now. To bring up CIS checks, just because I wrote them all, or most of them. CIS is a security, I can't remember what it stands, computer internet security compliance that you have to have on some of your systems. It's, auditors dream to not bug you about stuff. So in order to run those, you would just do check CIS and pass them through, and then you would get a separate Power JSON file, and you'd have to change your data source inside of, because I can't run it right now because it's installing the update. You would have to change your data source inside of the PowerBI and refresh it, and it would show you all the checks that you're passing for security compliance for CIS. So that gives you a way of proving whether your servers are security compliant with CIS without having to let auditors on the system, if you can get them to approve that as a way to do it, and not let them run their nasty tools that need sysadmin access, because you can trust your tools better. And we are looking at adding a STIG project as well for the federal government security compliance stuff, because I happen to get stuck into security compliance at my new job. And figure it should be available to the world instead of just something I write internally. So, but right now it is installing the newest CU9 for SQL Server. I don't think that's the one that includes the security update, but that's fine. It's just extracting it, but it went and downloaded it from the internet for me, and it's actually installing the update. And then that will actually knock one more thing off of this report and a few other things. And we didn't run it again after we did these other things, I don't think, for ad hoc workload and stuff, but yeah, we did. But we're down to 11 things, which is pretty good. Oh, we did. So we did run it again. Latest build will come off of there. So we get it down to 10 by the time the end of the presentation is done. And that's pretty good. And some of these I can't fix because I'm not on an active domain, and I can't fix network latency because, well, it's in Azure. I can't do anything about what it's doing. It's on the same server. I don't know why it has network latency. But there's a few things I can't put it on Caribos because I'm not on a domain. So MaxStop is just acting weird. So those are the basics of those things. But the CIS stuff is a very cool use case for it as well. And I'm going to go ahead and I think we covered all the questions, but this is my question slide at the end. I'll go ahead and skip past that one and thank everybody for attending. And I encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions on anything you might happen to see on my blog, or in general. I have a tendency to answer anything that comes my way. The easiest way, again, to find me if you can't spell Boggiano is databasesuperhero.com. My DMs on LinkedIn are open. My email is available on my website. It's very easy. It's just Tracy at tracyboggiano.com. And I do have a tendency to email back within probably the same day if I'm not too busy. So, and the slides and everything are available on my presentations page for download with the code. And just if you have any more questions or need anything else, just feel free to reach out.
You got one question right now you can probably answer. Does this need user interaction, or can it be fully automated as a plugin to run weekly health checks across the entire DB landscape?
Oh yeah, you can automate it to run weekly health checks across the entire landscape and just dump it to a table, or you can actually, I think there's this guy that I know, Anthony Green, that's doing it, that he's got it automated across, like, I don't know, hundreds of servers, and he's running it automated, and I think he's got it going into the enterprise version of Power BI instead of the Power BI desktop. So it can be completely automated. So there's the Slack community channel. The Slack community has a dbachecks channel. So if you have like any specific questions there as well that I can't answer, or you want to talk to someone else that's doing something in particular with it, that's a good place to go as well.
Got lots of thank yous. Really fantastic information that you shared today.
Thank you.
Help a lot of people out just to automate. You know, that's, to me, that's the thing about being a DBA. It's all about automating everything that you can. And so,
Oh yeah, this is just like the beginner, and then you gotta build up from what this is, but this is how to get started type thing. So
fantastic. Let's see, let me check and see if there's another question here. Lots and lots of thank yous. So,
yay! I did my job.
Yeah,
I had to follow Ree, so I had to make sure I was on game here.
Yeah.
Well, we had 53 people. A few have dropped off now, but it's a pretty decent count, I thought.
So,
yeah.
Like I said, following Ree is a hard thing to do. So,
yeah, she is amazing. Her talk was really, really great. And
yes.
Yeah.
She's always great, like I said, and I had to follow her.
She's not fallen trees. Oh my gosh, this transcriber is funny.
Yeah.
I know it's not like some of the stuff I'm saying. It usually does pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But I did get a new mic because the movers broke my mic. That's the only thing I found broken so far since I moved. Oh. And I did successfully find my pillows yesterday, so I got to sleep in my own bed for the first time in over a week.
Nice. So
they were hidden in a tiny box in my son's room.
So the next presentation is the mentoring panel discussion. So everybody be sure to join us for that one. So I'm going to go ahead.
That's at 10:30, right? Another 15 minutes.
Another 15 minutes. Yes.
Yes.
So, all right. I'm going to end this one. So thanks, Tracy. It was amazing. And
thank you. Yep.
No problem. I hope y'all have a good day. Hope the rest of the conference goes great.
So far,
thank you.
Good.
So far, so good.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye.